Hello and welcome to the Afrofuturism module for Dr. Ben Attias' seminar. My name is Tobias C. van Veen. I have a PhD in Philosophy and Communication Studies, and I wrote my dissertation on Afrofuturism. So there's a couple things I'd love to go over today in approximately 15 minutes, of which we'll have time to cover as much as possible about Afrofuturism. But the three main things I'm going to get into are this: a bit of the cultural history and background of Afrofuturism. We should have a good understanding of what Afrofuturism is, some provisional definitions. We should understand why it's important on a political level and a cultural level. And we should understand perhaps two strong concepts that come out of Afrofuturism, one being chronopolitics, the politics of chronos, of time, temporal politics, using temporality as a kind of political strategy, and radical becoming, this idea of becoming, or ontogenesis, the genitive becoming of being. So a non-static becoming, a non-static identity, an identity that shifts and destabilizes and shape shifts. So we're going to talk a little bit about radical black ontology, so radical black ontogenesis and becoming, and the shifting of black identity through Afrofuturism. All right, let's maybe get back to some straight up definitions. Hopefully you've had a chance to look through Ytasha Womack's amazing Afrofuturism book, which came out in 2013. She has a really great definition of Afrofuturism on page 9. So if you check out page 9, she writes, Afrofuturists redefine culture and notions of blackness for today and the future. Afrofuturism is an intersection of imagination, technology, the future, and liberation. Afrofuturism combines elements of science fiction, historical fiction, speculative fiction, fantasy, Afrocentricity, and magical realism with non-Western beliefs. This is a great definition because it's a meta-definition. It looks at futurist, Afro-diasporic cultural production. So from across the Afro-diaspora, that means everywhere that people of African descent have either immigrated, migrated, or been forcefully relocated, thanks to the Atlantic slave trade. And how these various, very different peoples with different languages, different microcultures, different traditions, nonetheless have a shared interest in creating alternative futures, and especially alternative futures to that of white colonialism, to that of white supremacism, to that what we just might call in general whiteness. If you look at most North American, especially American popular culture of the 20th century, most of it's white. Most of it reflects white reality, and critically, as a critical race studies scholar, you can look at most media, most films, most pop music for most of the 20th century. It excludes blackness. It's not even until the mid-20th century that you start to see the entrance of black popular culture into popular culture as a whole. So, the importance of science fiction, of imagining utopias, different places, not necessarily an ideal kind of place, not an ideal utopia, but just a different place, a different future. Science fiction becomes a really important way to model radically different futures than what exists now. Now, this applies to Afrofuturism. It also applies in general. If you look at the work, for example, of Frederick Jameson, the Marxist postmodern critic in American Utopia and in other books, he reads science fiction and discusses science fiction for providing us different utopias, different models of different futures. Afrofuturism is really particularly concerned with this. It's often been called different things in the past: black science fiction, phonofiction, black Atlantic futurism. There's all kinds of different terms for it, Afro-diasporic futurism, but really what we're talking about is a focus upon creating alternative futures. Now, not just futures, not just imagining futures or science fictional futures, but also revisioning the past, rereading the past. What Afro-diasporic histories, what black cultures, what black histories have been excluded from the past, and how has the generally white scholarship, generally racist scholarship, especially in historical and anthropological disciplines in the past, reflected a past that excluded blackness. So a really important artist when I think about this is Sun Ra, the jazz performer. Here we have the cover to Space is the Place. Here's Sun Ra in the front. You can see he's in an Egyptian headdress. You should check out his 1974 film, Space is the Place, where he comes to Earth to deliver his message of peace through jazz music. Sun Ra was really important because this is him and his orchestra playing live. The orchestra is still touring today, by the way. Sun Ra is really important because he looked at ancient Egypt and read quite a bit of books and texts in Afrocentricity, which said white scholarships got it wrong. There were black pharaohs. Egypt was primarily a black region. It's part of Africa. So this idea of revisioning the past, critically reappraising the past, and also just in general as an artist or sort of cultural strategy, reimagining the past to include blackness. If you've studied philosophy, if you've read Hegel, then you know that Hegel, for example, dismissed the African continent from world history. So this kind of racist ideology permeates a lot of history of white, Western, European, intellectual scholarship, culture, arts, etc. So Afrofuturism is concerned with both future and past. This is where we get into this concept of chronopolitics. Chronopolitics comes from Kodwo Eshun. There he is on the back, Mr. Eshun, British Ghanaian author. And he saw this idea of rewriting the past to project new futures that infiltrate into the present. So when we get to the point of futures infiltrating into the present, we start to discuss radical black becoming and radical black ontogenesis. And here's where we start to come across, especially in pop culture today, in the past 50 years, performers who, black performers who appear as alien and androidal, or as androids, or as kind of a becoming animalia. So you have, for example, just to grab a couple of LPs here. Today you have, from the UK, Lady Vonderdy, who works with Haitian Loa, a religious iconography, as well as you can see here the kind of Cometian pharaoh thematic. From Jamaica, classic dub albums, you have Lee Scratch Perry and the Upsetters' Super Ape. Here you have this reclamation of this idea that like Afro-diasporic peoples are beastly or non-human, they're closer to animals, this racist ideology. Here you have the reclamation of this racist ideology with the Super Ape. Of course, you have Return of the Super Ape, the follow-up, and King Tubby's heavy metal dub. There's all kinds of science fictional, superhero, black comics thematics going on here. Titles include tracks like Having Fun with the Klingons, Rocking the Time Warp dub. You get the picture. Science fiction dub. As for today, I think one of the most important figures rocking Afrofuturism in her thematics and tropes is Janelle Monáe. Here you have her first EP, the Metropolis EP. Now you can see here on the cover, if you've seen Fritz Lang's silent film Metropolis, you'll recognize the reference. It's a great silent film. If you haven't seen it, it's about a proletarian workers' revolt from the underground of the city, and one of the main protagonists is actually a feminine android. Monáe actually takes this trope of the feminine android and the title Metropolis as well, to create an Afrofuturist science fiction liberationist narrative where Janelle Monáe herself, she says her DNA has been stolen, she's been cloned into an android. This android is part of this sort of future society where androids serve humans, and this is clearly an allegory for slavery, an allegory for contemporary oppressed cultures, black cultures. And here on the front cover, as you can see, she's been dismembered, she's been disassembled, and she's white. she's got a white metallic sheen. And this is fascinating because we assume that this photo, she's actually been captured and her android body has been slightly dismembered and her black skin has been turned off, deactivated. If you watch the Many Moons video, uncut on YouTube from Janelle Monáe, you'll see her press a button on the back of her neck and she flickers from white to black. So there she's, in a way, challenging and destabilizing the relationship of skin to race, and she's destabilizing white skin as well by showing how white skin, or this idea of whiteness, can be destructured, destabilized by a radical Afrofuturist blackness. Her next album is The Arch Android, and again you have these pharaonic Cometian motifs playing in her work. Here she is again on the front cover, sorry, inside cover, and most lately The Electric Lady, which continues the story of Cindy Mayweather, her pop icon alter ego, which is how she's hiding in plain sight from the authorities in this sort of mythological science fictional world she's built up through her albums. So Janelle Monáe's mythology aside, what matters here is the way that she initiates several different types of becoming, a becoming android, a becoming pop culture superstar, and these are not just identities, not just static things, but actually like exits from white humanism, exits from white ontology, exits from intersectional givens of subjectivity. So that's actually a really important last concept there. And it comes out of, to a degree, the work of Caribbean theorist Sylvia Wynter. Sylvia Wynter read a lot of Frantz Fanon, another most excellent radical anti-colonial theorist from the mid-20th century. And Fanon talks about the relationship between the colonized and the colonizer. And he says that the colonized, as in the racialized black body, the racialized black identity under the white colonizer, is seen as an object, not a person, an object, not a subject, right? A what, not a who. And instead of saying, oh, you know, we should struggle for the position of subject under a white system of what defines subject and object, Fanon hints at the idea of a radical subject position of becoming the object, of reclaiming the position of object, the political force of object. Wynter really picks up on this and talks about exiting essentially white humanist ontology. Kodwo Eshun takes this even further in his book More Brilliant Than the Sun and talks about all manner of becoming alien, becoming android, becoming machinic, becoming animalia as different exits from not just white humanism and white Enlightenment humanism and white supremacist identities that are foisted onto racialized peoples, Afro-diasporic peoples, but also ways to escape essentialist concepts of blackness too, like what it means to be black, insofar as such concepts of blackness are defined by white supremacist constructs. So often you see blackness in the media as a threat, especially in today's policing environment in the United States, the threat of the black male. Either that, or it's the hyper-athletic or hyper-sexualized black male in sports, or the hyper-sexualized black female in pop culture. These are all identities which have been constructed by white supremacy, and if you don't fit into these slots, you just kind of fall at the bottom, right? So what Wynter, what Eshun are getting at are exits from this system where there's only so many avenues available to be black, to be other than white. Okay, so we can also look at some other fantastic science fiction examples here. Chief among them behind me is Lieutenant Nyota Uhuru from Star Trek, the original series, played by Nichelle Nichols. Interesting commentary here is with the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, she's been turned into a Mattel Collector's Edition Barbie doll. Very interesting. You could either advance this as a critique or a positive thing. I see it both at the same time, but I'm very happy to have my edition here of Uhuru. Now, what matters with Uhuru, especially with Nichelle Nichols, is in the 1960s, she was actually thinking of quitting the show. And she met Dr. Martin Luther King literally at a dinner party, and she recants this story often. She met him at a dinner party, and he said, "Don't quit. Don't quit. You can't do it. What you are representing on television is too important. It's too important because you are representing blackness in the future. You're a bridge officer." She's actually third in command. If Kirk goes down, if Spock goes down, she's actually the bridge officer. So pretty important position, but an important representational and symbolic position within a science fictional imaginary broadcast through popular culture, right? So representation of blackness in the future in science fiction popular culture matters. It has political effects, it has cultural effects. And we can trace these pop culture effects. So black girls who grew up watching Nichelle Nichols as Uhuru on television, one of them was Mae Carol Jemison, who became the first black astronaut at NASA. We can also look at LeVar Burton, who also grew up watching Nichelle Nichols. He played Geordie LaForge on Next Generation. And there's a particular Next Generation episode where Mae Jemison appears as a Star Trek officer. So there you have the interplay of science fiction and representations of science fiction and actual science. That's the force of Afrofuturism.